Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Got to tell you, ever since I met this man, did some podcasts with him, every time I'm driving, all I'm doing is looking at trucks. It's kind of weird. I was yesterday driving literally next to a rig, and I'm focusing on the road, but I'm turning my head, like just looking at the different placards on the vehicle, what they're doing for safety, how the vehicle is operating in a safe manner, and all of that. Safety first is what he's all about. He works with motor carrier companies to make sure that their vehicles are safe. And that's from rigs to tankers to all of that. And also make sure that they adhere to the guidelines, both state and federal. And he's back with us, Matt Freeman from DOT Training Solutions. Today, we're going to look at what's on the road, what's out there, the magnitude of our trucking force. Matt, welcome back. How's it going today?
Hey, going great. Thanks for having me back, Steve. Looking forward to another great topic here today.
Yeah, this one I'm loving just as much as the others, because I think we're going to be surprised in learning what's happening on the roads. And am I seeing more trucks? Is there more and more vehicles delivering than there ever have been before?
Well, I want to say yes, because I'm the same way. From today's stats, what we had stats from a couple of years ago is more accurate. If you go to look up something today, it's going to give you stats from a couple of years ago, just because things are growing, and there's lots of new companies out there. Some markets are booming, some aren't so much. Some are getting bought up by larger companies. So therefore there is growth in that sense.
Sure.
Just to give you an idea about regulated trucking companies, okay, that have U.S. DOT numbers, all right, which, so therefore they're either interstate or intrastate, commercial company, okay, they're operating in some type of commerce. So, some of the stuff I've kind of pulled up here, we're going back to 2022, okay, it's just a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was 813,000 plus U.S. DOT numbers. That means 813,000 companies out there with a U.S. DOT number that's being regulated, that's actually registered with the government. That's a lot of companies. Okay, that's a lot of transportation.
That's just companies?
That's just companies. So every company gets a DOT number. So that's not counting the trucks that are on the road that go with those.
That's my point. That's insane. Like, that's almost 1 million companies.
Yeah. And with that, just to kind of, now we talk about what goes with that, the stats I have here are about 5.8 million total drivers. That was 2022.
Wow.
So you figure these companies out of that 813,000 are anywhere from one, owner, driver, to hundreds to thousands in these companies. That's what makes up this total amount of drivers. And you can only imagine how many power units and trailers are out there with that. This is CDL and non-CDL drivers. If they meet that definition of a commercial motor vehicle, that's what's on our roads. That's what's being regulated on a daily basis.
Wow. What was that stat on the drivers?
The stat I have here is as far as the total drivers go, you're looking at 5.8 million drivers, and then you have CDL drivers at about 4 million drivers.
Wow.
So not just the big rigs, but commercial motor vehicles of, anything over 10,001 pounds. So your everyday box truck, your U-Haul style trucks,
Okay.
they're over 10,001, under 26, but they're still regulated. So your local furniture delivery stores, your Amazons, things like that are, in some type of a smaller type commercial motor vehicle, they're being looked at as well. They're regulated.
Wow. That's it's mind blowing. And then, of course, now we have to think about the safety involved. If all of them, every driver, every vehicle, every company that we're talking about here isn't at the top of their game in terms of safety, we have a problem. It's a challenge here.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing here on when you go back and look at, and I think about what I used to do back in my career of, doing enforcement. Kind of give you an idea on state and federal inspections. Okay. Again, we're looking at 2022 states. This is both state enforcement and federal enforcement inspectors, okay, or investigators doing this. Just in 2022, we had 2.9 million inspections conducted on motor carriers.
Okay.
Okay, that's on vehicles. Now, out of that 2.9 million, there in 2022, there was only out of state and federal enforcement, 12,000 plus inspectors.
Wow. That's DOT inspectors?
DOT inspectors.
How do you
State and
define a
federal
DOT? Define a DOT inspector.
This a DOT inspector or safety investigator is going to be anybody who's gone through the program with their enforcement division as a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or your state commercial enforcement, officers, your roadside officers, your everyday investigators who still do these type of inspections. Either from not necessarily the roadside, but from scale house to doing internal stuff. When they go into a site and they're doing, working on it with a vehicle, doing inspections, investigations, what they're doing. So that's total. Now, it just kind of amazes me when I go back and look at these numbers. I never really thought of it this way, that out of all those inspections, all those companies that are out there, and then you only have 12,000 safety inspectors on the roads and internally doing this every day. That's a lot. That is a ton.
And when we say DOT inspectors, they're approved by the DOT. Doesn't mean that they're working for the DOT, right?
That is correct. They have gotten a certification through FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, through their states to have the authority to do those types of inspections. It's a whole special. It's not just your everyday police academy, for example, your highway patrol academies. This is extended onto that because it's not just learning how to be a law enforcement officer. It's also learning how to do these inspections and, different types of certifications, from working with hazmat, that's a specialized area. Buses is a specialized area because, they're not just like any, truck going down the road. There's specialties there. So they're trained, and all the criteria comes from the U.S. government. That's passed on to the states, and then they get grant money to be a part of the funding to do the enforcement. So that's how all these inspectors get trained. So yeah, it's pretty crazy out there. Some of the things that you look at. So just out of that, when I say 12,000 inspectors, we're looking at just driver inspections alone. Okay, just inspect, when the driver stopped and inspections under the driver, 2.8 million inspections. So there's different levels of inspections that they can do. They can do a full inspection where it would include the driver and the vehicle, or they can just do a vehicle, or they can do a driver, or they can do a partial inspection. So they're not always doing a completely full inspection. It kind of determines on what that officer's looking at the time of the inspection.
When we talk about the different types of inspections, I know you identified some of them. We talk about buses. There's one type of inspection. How many different are there? We have the tankers. We have the rigs. We have the buses. Again, what else is out there?
Sure. So let me go back down here. I'll kind of give you a really good idea. So there are 6 types of inspections, okay, that enforcement DOT inspectors, officers are trained on. Okay, you have a level 5 inspection. Okay, that's a terminal inspection. So that we go one site and you're just looking at the vehicle. Okay, so you're doing that's one type of inspection. Then they're trained to also do what they call level 6 is radioactive material. Okay, so if you're looking at RAM or any of the bad stuff, I always call it, anything that's radioactive, there's a special training just for that. Okay. Then they call what they have a level 1 inspection. That's a full inspection. So when the roadside stops you, they're not only just looking at the vehicle, they're looking at the driver, they're looking at his license, they're looking at his logbooks, they're looking at the entire works, the whole package there. Okay. Then you have what they call a level 2 inspection, which is a walk around inspection. They're only looking at a minimum amount of things to do a walk around inspection. Then you have a level 3. So instead of doing an inspection on the vehicle, this strictly we're going to walk up and just talk to the driver. Okay, that's a driver inspection. Then they have a level 4 inspection, which they call a special study inspection. So there's different types of inspections that these officers have an option to do, depending on their state, their surroundings, conditions. They may only do a certain inspection just because of the conditions they're in. Or if their agency only requires them to do level 1s, then that's all they're going to do, level 1s. It just kind of depends on what the agency is requesting of their officers to do at the time. So to kind of give you an idea of how much is going on out there as far as like your walk around inspections to your full inspections, a level 1 inspection is about 30% of what they were doing in 2022 when they pull someone over. And then you have your walk around inspections, which was another 35%. So you kind of see what's happening the most of. And then you have a driver only, which is about 32%, which is your level 3. So your 1, 2, and 3s are your more common inspections. Your level 5s are always nice if you're at a terminal and you're there for because of there's some bad vehicles out there. You're doing a level 5 inspection without a driver. You're doing strictly just a vehicle and trailer inspection, or maybe a box van with as a straight truck. You're doing that. So there's a lot of detail goes into that, but I don't think a lot of the public really understands how much is really going on or what's not going on with all that.
Just for information purposes only, and my curiosity, and I think others wonder about this too. Amazon exploding in the last couple of years.
Yes.
You see a lot of Amazon vans out there. I don't know if they're Sprinter vans or whatever, but how are they making sure that those vehicles are safe? And do they get around some of the regulations by putting vans, smaller vehicles that transport on the road?
Well, and that's a really good question, and that's come up many times in my career. So depending on what the vans are used for, okay, if they're considered to be a passenger motor vehicle, there's certain criteria that goes with that. If they're under the regulations and they're still a passenger vehicle, under the weight and they're still a passenger vehicle, there's certain regulations that go with it. Okay. So it kind of depends on the type of Sprinter van, what we're calling a Sprinter van. And I know what you're talking about, the little gray ones that run around, slide door open.
You got it.
I see them out in front of my house or my neighborhood on a regular basis.
Yep. This studio is located not even a mile away from a major hub, Amazon hub. So when I'm driving here in the morning, I'm in back of all of them. I'm talking dozens, and they all deploy at the same time. So it's a sea of gray. And I just wondered what's going on there.
Yeah, so Amazon, I'm very careful because I only know, I see what you do.
Sure.
And when it comes down to they have grown their fleet. They've got into the transportation industry on their own. The last probably 5, 6, 8 years now. I guess they've really built up their fleet. They got it really depends what they're doing with those Sprinter vans. What regulatory falls with it. Do some of them fall into the regulations? Absolutely. It's just Can some of them maybe fall out? Maybe. It really just depends on size. And I don't know their sizes, so I can't really say every single one of them do. But you got to look at interstate commerce too. You got some of these vans going to interstate commerce, crossing state lines. Well, depending on the size of that van and what it's doing, it could fall in there too.
Hmm.
A good example, kind of like Amazon, is U.S. mail. U.S. mail is always in interstate commerce
Hmm.
because it goes across states, right? U.S. mail is always going to be in interstate commerce.
When you say that category, does that also apply to the local mail delivery truck, even though it comes under those guidelines because it's interstate?
Could.
Or can be.
It could, yeah. I mean, you got the U.S. mail, you got FedEx, you got UPS. They're crossing state lines every day. So depending on the size of those vehicles and you start looking at definitions and what they're doing. Yeah, they could very well
Hmm.
fall right into those regulations.
Wow. Because, I could mail something uh, down the street, but I could receive something from another state. So I guess it would, since it is transporting out of state cargo, that would be
Mhm.
interstate regulated.
Origin and destination. It's not necessarily wheels crossing. It's the freight that's moving.
Right. Wow. Okay. Never knew that. That's it. That's interesting because
Yeah.
it can go from one vehicle to another by the time it gets to you. And the last two vehicles never cross the state line, but it's still where it
It's
originated
still
from.
it's still an interstate movement because
Wow.
you always got to look at origin and destination.
Wow. Interesting. So what other insight do you have, Matt, about what's going on out there? Any other
So
stats?
yeah, a few other things here. I always get a lot of times companies ask me, well, why are you here and what are we looking for? And I'm like, well, here's some of the things on drivers. Here's some of the top violations that were discovered in 2022.
Mm,
Okay. Failure to obey traffic laws. That's
yep.
that's still going to be, and when you got a big rig or even just any commercial motor vehicle, these guys got to follow the laws. There's a reason they're more strict with these bigger vehicles. We kind of talked about that last week about safe driving.
Sure.
Uh, Speeding still a big one.
Really.
Uh, False logs. We talked about in the past that these drivers if they falsification on their log books, the EODs. Just to give you an idea on false reported driver record, there were 60,000 violations written just on that one alone. Failing to use seatbelts. We had 53,000 violations written for these guys just not putting on their lap belt.
Wow.
And I think every state now it is a law you have to wear a seatbelt. As far as I'm pretty sure it's all states now.
I
And
remember when it
especially
came out, and I worked in radio. I still do, but back
Mhm.
then, I would do a newscast, and at the end of every newscast, after the traffic report, it would be click it or ticket. Just a reminder,
Mhm.
because the
Yep.
laws were recently enacted. I do believe it's every state, but interesting how these drivers are getting caught. Motor carrier drivers are getting caught for not having their seatbelt on. Uh, you would think you're driving a big rig like that, you definitely want to be buckled up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some of the things that I've seen are like, well, how do you catch somebody? Well, sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. But whenever you say, "Hey, go ahead and put that seatbelt on," and the seatbelt won't even latch because it's gummed up or gooed up,
Oh,
whatever it may be, it's kind of like, well, there's a good indication you didn't have your seatbelt on. Just a little example. The other one that gets me here is operating a CMV without a CDL.
hmm.
There's so many folks that get in trouble for this for multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. You jumped in a pickup truck that meets the definition, but then you throw a trailer in the back of it. Now you're into CDL category. You're not thinking about it. You're just you're doing a job. You get pulled over, you get caught. Well, then
Sure.
it happens. But again, you're a commercial company. You need to know the rules and regulations. Um, And that's where we come in. This is where we come in. We train the drivers and make sure that they're understanding. I like seeing these. Now, yeah, these were 2022 numbers, but we want to see these numbers go down. We don't. The more if you start seeing a rise, when we really got an issue. If you start seeing these numbers come down, well, you know, uh, companies like myself we're doing our job, and the federal and state government is doing their job because they're getting the point across. That's what we want to see, and that's where the training comes in. So some of the other things that where we try to help folks is my biggest pet peeve is these guys doing their drivers are doing their pre and post trip inspections, their walk around, making sure everything's working. Again, you got to have your brake lights, your tail lights, your blinkers, your horn, your brakes. You want to make sure these are working. Don't just go jump in the vehicle and take off. I get it. Money's time. Time is money. But, just to give you an idea, in 2022, or just lighting in general, inoperable lamps, okay, 372,000 violations were written for inoperable lamps. Does that happen? I mean, do you get a light out? Sure, it happens. These big rigs are bouncing up and down all the time. Things do short out. I get it. Okay. Let's see with some other things here. Inoperative turn signals. We had 116,000 just in that one. Flat or audible leak in a tire, 109,000. Now what is keeping that vehicle moving down the road? It's tires. So there's certain things here that you look at and it's just, this is where we come in and we want to help folks, give them that training that they need. Our motto is to keep everything one step ahead and not two steps back. And by just taking that extra step, to be a little proactive, when you see numbers like this, you automatically go in that reactive mode.
It can be alarming. It can be alarming to knowing that what's out there. Now, when you work with a motor carrier company and just improving their safety record, is there a DOT inspector that's assigned to that job, or will be at some point?
So you're for my side of it, or like when I'm working with them? Yes.
Yes.
So what we do is whenever we with all my team, when we get a new customer, we'll see what their pain points are, what their needs are. If it's training, consulting, all the above. I do assign each of my teammates a carrier. Then they work one-on-one with that carrier. And when there's problems or questions, we have what we call our round table. We all get back together and then we work at the best situation solution for the customer and keep them running safe.
Wow. Thanks for sharing this today. I think I want to thank you. It's a wake up, but it's an important one because this is why we talk about safety and why what you're doing is so important in keeping these companies on track. But ultimately it's up to the motor carrier companies to say, hey, yeah, we got to make sure we're safe. We got to make sure we're safer. Let's hire Matt and have him come in, analyze everything. I'm sure there's things going on right now that these companies with hundreds of thousands, what we talk, 5 million drivers, they're not even aware of. They're not even aware of.
Yeah. A lot of folks just want to, make a good living. They go jump in a truck and say, hey, my grandfather, my uncle, my cousin, this is what they do. So I'm going to go jump in a truck too.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it starts. It really is. Or, you got two folks sitting in a bar and they say, hey, you know what? Let's start a trucking company tomorrow. Next thing you know, they got a trucking company. Did they do their homework?
No, probably not. Probably not. As they wrote the plan down on a napkin.
Exactly right.
How do we engage you and your team if somebody is connected to a motor carrier company and just wants to take those steps?
Yeah, you can reach me. Take a look at our website. We got a great new website. It's dottrainingsolutions.com. You can also reach me at 573-416-8203. That's my direct number. I answer all, whenever I get a chance, I make sure I take all the calls I can. If not, anybody on my team will help anybody. And you can also reach me at Matt, M-A-T-T, at dottrainingsolutions.com, or find our info at DOT Training Solutions. That's also on our website. So please feel free, jump out there and give us a holler.
Appreciate all the insight, all the details. Honestly, every time we get together, we learn more of what's going on out there, and we need to be aware. And I appreciate that. And thanks for doing what you do.
Hey, thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it.
I'll talk to you next time. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.